Welcome to another episode of Not Hex. I'm 43OG, and today we're going to find out the truth about fiat, not FIAT. I think we already know the truth about that. We're going to talk about PHIAT, which is a protocol on PulseChain. And I'm lucky enough to have a gentleman by the name of Dylan here to explain to me what fiat is and what it does. And I've also got Blue Bum here as well. So yeah, let's get stuck into it. Let's bring up Dylan. G'day, Dylan. How you going?
How's it going, sir? I'm doing well.
That's good. That's good. I know we were just chatting before. You guys have had a bit of weather in your part of the world, but
That's right.
everything's
We had
okay.
we had a little bit of a hurricane pass over Florida. Kind of the norm around here this time of year. So, but it missed my area, and it was more up north. So, but yep, we're all good.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, and we've got Bluey here as well. So we had originally scheduled to do this yesterday, but because of the hurricane, we're doing it today, which is all fine on our end. It's good on your end, and yeah, let's get stuck into it. As someone who's a complete noob when it comes to all these other types of protocols, can you just tell me, just to begin with, in a nutshell, what is fiat? What's it trying to achieve?
Yeah. So, the brass tacks here is Fiat is like the decentralized bank for PulseChain, right? Its main goal is to allow you to play the game in three ways. You can be like a depositor, like at a regular bank, um, with a range of different assets on PulseChain. Like you can do, you can deposit your Pulse, you can deposit PulseX, you can deposit Hex, a range of different stable coins, ETH and Bitcoin, right? And you can get a deposit rate on that. Okay, and that's based off of use on the market, right? And then you can be a speculator. Okay, you can be somebody that's taking out loans, whether it's to pay off some debt, whether it's to speculate on a personal business venture that you're doing, whether it's to short the price of one of the assets or long the price of one of the assets, or if you're arbitraging, right? As a depositor, you don't really want to, you don't have to worry about that stuff, right? You're just using your funds as collateral for some, or as a deposit for somebody else to use. Okay, then they go create their economic energy of whatever that they're doing, and then you get a deposit rate, right? And then the third way that you can play this game is by essentially being like an equity shareholder of the bank itself, right? So you get 50% of the revenue generated on the platform by staking your fees, or I'm sorry, by staking your fiat, right? So that's pretty cool.
And when you say staking your fiat, that's a token?
Correct. Yeah. So Fiat, the platform has a token. It's got a fixed supply, all that stuff, and you can stake it. It's similar to Hex, but it doesn't have like the bonuses and stuff like that. Like there's no bigger pays better. There's no longer pays better, anything like that. You're basically just staking your portion of the supply, and then you can collect fees with your portion, or you don't stake, and your fees go to the treasury, right? So it's
Okay.
pretty straightforward.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So let's drill into each of those. You said depositor. So if I understand this correctly, if you've got Pulse, PulseX, Hex, a few of the stables, and you know what, it might be easier if I actually pull up the website and we can have a look at it, and maybe you can talk me through what I'm looking at here.
Sure. I will.
Okay, I might just get rid of us so that we're not blocking the view. Okay, so we've got Fiat, which is fiat.io. That's the website, and which is a cross-chain DeFi bank. Let's say I want to be a depositor, for example. Where would I go, and what would I do here?
So let's go to launch app. Let's see if that goes to the PulseChain version at the top. There you go. That's on pulse. There you go. So if you were to deposit something, you could go to the deposit tab at the top, or you can click on one of the assets. There you go, right there. Yep. It's going to want you to connect your wallet and all that stuff.
Yep.
Obviously, you don't have one you don't have a wallet connected. But if you did, you would just click on Pulse, and then it would pop up a screen how much you wanted to deposit, right? And it would ask for a token spend approval, and then you would deposit your assets, however much you wanted, right? And
Okay.
so you can see the deposit APY on Pulse is 0.11% right now, right? So um, it's low, but with economic energy that goes on with the system, as more liquidity is entered into the market, those will most likely grow, right, as speculation comes back to the chain. You know what I mean? So um,
So how long has Fiat been going?
I think this is the third day.
The third
So
day. Okay, so it is early days, and um, I would expect yield to you would expect yield is to increase with activity.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
So let's
Okay.
compare with Aave, right? Because Fiat is a fork of Aave with a little bit of tweaks to it, but essentially it's a pretty faithful Aave fork. Okay, besides a couple things, but Ethereum had very massive success, and Aave did very well on Ethereum, right? And they have, I think, in the pit of the bear market, they have about $13 billion of deposits, maybe 10 billion now, and their fee generation for just their depositors and the Aave Foundation is up there with Uniswap, right? So 200K fees a day kind of thing, right? So they have a lot of economic energy going on the Aave protocol. You can there's only a couple assets that can be on there, right? So a couple of the stable coins, the blue chips like Bitcoin, Ethereum, things like that, right? So um, and all this stuff is really valuable, as you've seen with FTX or BlockFi or Voyager, the shadow banks of the space, where they weren't decentralized, they weren't on chain and very transparent. These guys, they ended up stealing a bunch of money or misappropriating funds of these customers, um, and that's why having these DeFi banks like Aave prevail in those times. It goes to show that these things are very valuable and they're very useful. You know what I mean? So,
So so as someone who is would consider depositing, how can I be sure, or what assurances do I have that it's safe to do that? Like is
well, yeah. So there's always contract risk, right? We don't know if there's an underlying bug that has been in the Aave contract since its launch, right? So Aave launched in 2017, right? It's been around for a while. Okay,
yeah,
it's
6
been doing
years.
its thing. Yeah, yeah. It's been doing for a very long time, and we can be pretty confident that as time goes on, the amount of bugs or vulnerabilities kind of diminish. Okay, but with that being said, there's still risk, right? Like Richard says, we're lucky that any of this shit works at all. Okay, but so there is that risk, right? Contract risk. There's some things that we have in the Hex ecosystem that are kind of special to us, where we have a lot of centralized ownership in the token holdings, right? So we all know that the OA exists. They've been acting as a good character in Hex since the beginning, right? They've never sold anything that we know of, and I think we can go out and confidently say that they've never sold anything. Okay, and then that's probably the same with PulseChain. But there are still people in Hex that can send they can drive the liquidity very fast, right? So there's some risk mitigation factors that we've had on Fiat, where we've limited the amount that can be deposited at any one time or for any one account, right? And then a global ceiling for how much can be deposited, right? So you can't have a situation where, somebody deposits a billion hex and then they borrow everything, and then there's not enough uh, funds in the liquidity pool for Hex, that if that person got liquidated, the platform would literally be left holding the bag, right? So the platform would be, it'd have bad debt, right? So that's one of the mitigation factors that we've done, tailored to the ecosystem, right? So,
So I mean, there's you deposit tokens,
yep,
and you get a yield in terms of a
the
portion of the
tokens themselves.
fees
Yep.
of that same token.
Yeah. So the
Okay, yeah, yeah.
borrower is paying a higher APY than you're getting as a depositor,
Are
right?
they borrowing your tokens?
That's correct. Yeah. Yep. This is peer-to-peer lending, sir.
Right. So what I guess the first question is that comes to my mind, the most obvious question is what stops them from not paying those tokens back?
That's a great question. So the way that borrowing works on fiat is you have to have over collateralized lending. Okay, so it's like the bare bones. There's no sort of leverage lending like
Mm,
there is with you taking out a mortgage at your local bank, right? You have to. It's more so like you're going to say a private wealth guy at JP Morgan, and you have a bunch of stocks that you want to
mm,
borrow against, right?
mm,
And
mm,
obviously they're not going to take and give you $2 million on $200,000 worth of stock, right? But they will do that for a mortgage. Okay, so that's different. But with the stock, they'll let you borrow 50K versus the 100K or whatever, right? So
mm,
depending
mm.
on that risk profile. So it works the same way with fiat, right? You have to
Okay.
have your deposits. So like Pulse, you can borrow, I think, 50% LTV, right? So
So where
uh,
would I see these figures?
if
Um,
you here, if you, I'll share my screen so we can.
okay.
How about that? Yeah, and you can bring it up when you're ready. Yeah. So, um, if you wanted to see the stats for these, you can see that the maximum LTV for Pulse is 50%. The
Yep.
liquidation threshold that is in the case of if this person never pays back their loan, um, they take a liquidation penalty on their holdings, their collateral, and
Mm,
that's given to the liquidators. Okay, and then at the threshold, it'll be when your debt is worth more than 55% of your collateral, you're going to be liquidated. Right? It's going to start ticking away at your collateral until either your the way we measure your debt to income, or I'm sorry, your collateral to your debt is called a health factor, right? So when that goes
yep.
below 1, you start to get liquidated until either you have no more collateral or until your health factor goes back to 1 or above it. Okay. So, um, once you're back above 1, it'll stop liquidating you and stuff like
So
that. But
so can you give me a practical example of let's say I've got 100 million pulse,
okay.
and what would I do with that? I would
Sure.
go to Fiat. I'd go and let's say I want to borrow against that,
Uh-huh.
and so the benefit just there's sort of there can be a tax benefit for people doing this,
Sure.
because if you're borrowing against an asset you already have, that's in a lot of jurisdictions, at least, that's not taxable. That um, the stuff that you've borrowed and you're using is not taxed. Um,
Yeah. I think that I'm not a tax advisor, but I think that that's the general idea. Yeah. So you
yeah,
could definitely
yeah,
be in a
not
situation.
tax advice, by the way, not tax
Yeah.
advice, but I know for a fact that in some jurisdictions this is what is done. This is what
Yeah.
is done. But you would have to go do your own research and speak to your tax accountant and work it out for yourself.
Yeah. So that is something that you can do with this. Yes. You can take and you can borrow against these funds, to avoid any sort of taxes in your jurisdiction if that applies to you. Right.
Yep. So
Um,
let's say I want to borrow against that pulse, for example, and buy some hex.
okay.
Like, what do the numbers look like? Can we just do like a case study?
Sure. So, if we did, I don't know, 100,000 pulse, which is, uh, um, let's see here. I don't have that much on this particular account, but I have $100 of DAI.
Okay, $100 a die. Let's use die.
$168. Yeah. So if I have DAI, right, I can borrow. Let's say, let's create an example where, um, like I like to do arbitrage. Okay. And so there is arbitrage opportunities available where you could take and say you're sitting in cash, and you want to make a little bit of APY on that cash. Um, Perhaps you would be inclined to deposit on Fiat, and then go borrow PulseX, and then deposit that onto the almost single-sided staking pool on pHUX, which is paying. Let's see here, which is paying between 45% and 120 or 112% APY. So you could borrow against your stablecoin, PulseX, right? You could enter into this pool, you could stake it, and you could earn 45% or 112% on your PulseX. And you can start paying off your loan, which is, obviously when you borrow more, it's going to cost you more. But, right now the rate is 1.56%, right? So there's a clear arbitrage there that you could take advantage of. If you didn't have any PulseX, you could borrow some, right? And then you could start paying off your loan, and then obviously there's going to be profit there because 45% versus 1%. Clearly, there's a huge difference, right?
Of course, yeah, yeah,
So
that's a
that's
massive difference.
yeah. So
What is so? But these rates obviously they're variable. They're not fixed rates. They can change at any time.
that's
Um,
correct.
so there is, I think it's fair to say that there is some risk involved in doing these things.
Yeah,
You need to be aware of it's not just it's not automatic or guaranteed that it's that you're going to get there's a 40x difference between what the
correct.
cost is and what you're going to earn.
Of course, yes. And this is just an example that I can see right now, right? Um, there's other liquidity providing things that you can do, like say, you had Pulse, or PulseX, right? And you wanted to just borrow a stablecoin, um, and then you could throw it up in one of the stablecoin liquidity pools that we have on pHUX, right? Or you could use your stablecoin to borrow Pulse and PulseX, and then put it in the PulseX pool on to farm ink, right? There's different things that you can do. I like arbitrage, right? So these are the things that I look for as a speculator of sorts, right?
I just wanted to specifically ask if I wanted to, if I had some tokens and I wanted to borrow against those tokens, let's say just to buy hex and then stake my hex, for example. Let's
Okay.
say that was what I wanted to do. Let's say I have like the Pulse. What sort of I think you said 50%.
Yeah.
So if I had $1,000 worth of Pulse, I can then take $500 worth of buy $500 worth of hex.
Yes.
Is that
Now,
right?
when you do that, that is going to bring you close to a very low health
The
factor.
liquidation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you'd be in a very dangerous area, you could say, right? Because you're trying to
Yeah.
max out your LTV, right?
Yeah.
So you would probably want to either deposit more Pulse or borrow less against your Pulse, right? To kind of stay
Gotcha.
in that safer range. Okay. But this is like
And what can affect that range is the price of hex and the price of Pulse.
correct.
They're the things the two variables that are going to affect that range.
That's right. Yeah. So it's based off of, it would be 50% of your collateral worth, right? Because you can only borrow, 50% LTV. Okay. And then it would be divided by your debt. Okay. And so once that goes below one, then you're going to start getting liquidated, right? If that's well above one, then the price has to move, further until you get close to being liquidated, right? So let's say, um, you were a person that didn't have any PulseX, but you needed some, right? Because you wanted to farm it or whatever, right? And so, but you had a lot of Pulse. So you could deposit Pulse, you could go borrow your PulseX, go put it in a liquidity pool. Relatively, they track very closely. Their ratio may change, slightly depending on what's going on in the market or whatever. But right now, it's been sitting around a very, relatively the same ratio for a while now, right?
Mm,
So
mm.
theoretically, they should move up and down very similarly. Okay. Um, so in that sort of case, it would be less risky for you than if you were doing it versus a stable coin. So you could deposit your Pulse, borrow some PulseX, go into liquidity pool, go farm it. You never had to sell your Pulse. All you had to do is just borrow some PulseX, right? You pay attention to the ratio, make sure that you're not, getting close to liquidation. If you are, you just withdraw some of that PulseX, pay off your loan, or with the ink that you're farming, you make sure you pay off your loan a little bit faster, right? So
Yep,
it's
yep.
just
So we really are. This is really replacing things that the bank does.
yeah,
This is what this is. We're replacing things that the bank does, but we're doing it on the blockchain.
that's right.
I just want to bring Bluey in because I know he's got questions. So Bluey, if you want to jump in and um,
Yeah, cool. So it's a variable rate. If you deposit, it's a variable rate. And is that paid in what you're depositing, or is it paid in the fiat token?
No, that's paid in deposits, right? So that's the borrower paying the depositors. Okay,
Yep.
so you have a spread on the site where for a Pulse, right? It's the deposit of
Yeah, cool. So
0.11%.
it's paid in whatever you deposited into. Just wanted to
Correct. Yeah.
clarify. Yeah,
Yep.
clarify
That's
that.
right. Yep.
And so you don't okay. And then who sets the borrowing rate, or how is that set?
The market, right? So it's based off of use, right? So as more people start to use it, right? So it's like if there is $50,000 dollars available to be borrowed, and you max that out, you're going to get triple digit percentages of payments that you like of 100% APY or greater, right, for that particular asset that you're borrowing. Okay, so it can get very high if people are
So is there
using
like
it a lot.
is there a formula or something
Yeah, I
that
think it's in the
sets that
Gitbook.
up?
I believe the actual like particular numbers that are for each of the assets are in the documentation of
Right.
the
So
of the projects.
if you have few depositors and you have many people wanting to borrow, then that rate goes very, very high. And
Based off of size,
and
yeah.
if there's a lot of depositors and not very many borrowers, which I guess is the case is at the moment, then the rate is quite low.
Yeah, so like for instance on DAI, there's $180,000 of deposits, and then there's 80K worth of loans that are out right now on DAI, right? So
Uh-huh.
the deposit APY is 0.72, and then the borrow APY is 3.25, which is, I mean, that's pretty reasonable, right, for a stable
Okay.
coin.
Cool.
And
And
obviously, as that starts to fill up, or as people are borrowing more, they're going to pay more for their loans. So
based on that formula that's in the GitHub. Yeah, cool.
yeah, correct.
And do you also have uncollateralized flash loans?
So yes, there's flash loans on this. Yes, I didn't even mention that. Yeah. So if you are skilled enough to be coding this stuff, you can definitely borrow. I think the total market size is $1.8 million. So let's say you wanted a flash loan on Hex right now, right? You could borrow 300K with no collateral, right? But the way a flash loan works for everybody that don't know is it is a transaction that you create that happens in one block, and in that block, as long as the loan is paid back, you don't need any collateral, and you can borrow as much as you want, right? But in that transaction, if it is not able to be paid back, the transaction will not go through. Okay, but it is literally just a
Yeah,
transaction
so
where
it
you
has to be settled within the block, which is how it can
correct.
be uncollateralized,
Yeah,
right?
it's like you're building a bunch of transactions in that particular block, and you let it go in the network. If it's profitable, it'll execute and stuff. But if it's not, it just fails, right? And then you end up not borrowing anything for
And
everybody
what are
else
the
as well.
thing and what are the things that people would use that for?
Flash loans.
Yeah.
Um, I think probably the biggest use would be arbitrage. Other uses could be self liquidation. There could be uses where you can use it for leverage. So there's a really complex way where you can set up a flash loan to up your leveraged exposure to a certain asset. Okay. So instead of going and depositing, then borrowing against something, then buying it on the market, depositing more, borrowing more things, and then instead of doing that, what you do is you open up a flash loan, and then you only deposit the collateral needed to hold that position open, and then you can have leverage exposure to that particular asset, right? So it
Right.
skips all of the borrowing, then depositing and buying and borrowing, depositing, buying, right? To get more exposure to something, right? And
Yeah,
then
and basically they can do that because it's an uncollateralized loan, but it has to be settled within one block. So you just have to kind of, I guess it would be for people who see the opportunity and know how to do it very quickly and easily. Although I guess they'd set up bots for flash loans, basically when certain events like conditions are there, that it would trigger that.
yeah. So in this case, when you're trying to set up a leveraged position with a flash loan, what happens is you're also providing a deposit, okay, but you're creating a high leverage position on fiat with a flash loan, and then you have your so imagine you have a wound up position, okay, and then you have a little bit of collateral left over, okay. Now that collateral will still be able to pay off the loan. However, it's just wrapped up in a complex web of a flash loan, okay. I, this stuff is like it's not easy to explain, but essentially, I'm sure you guys have heard of like the haunted strat, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so it would be you doing a flash loan on the haunted strat and then having the remainder of the collateral. So you just only do one transaction, but essentially it's the haunted strat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you
And
still
how are
have
those
collateral.
rates? And how are those rates for the flash loans set? Are they also dependent on market and how much there is there, or?
I think it's a flat fee. I think it's uh, 30 basis points or 50 basis points. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Uh-huh. Audio. And aside from potential tax um, purposes, what would be the advantages of using something like fiat, aside from just like if you wanted a short, I would have thought it would be easier just to sell, and if you think it's going to go down, you wait for it to go down, and then you buy it back up, as opposed to this where you take out a loan and then you have to be paying interest on that loan, waiting for the price to go down, and then you can do your thing to get that arbitrage. Like, wouldn't it be more kind of financially beneficial just to sell what you want to sell if you want to short?
Sure. That's an easy question. Now, what happens if you've sold all of your tokens? How do you make money on it going down? You can't, right? So, like, if you don't have any more
Uh-huh.
hex, but you wanted to short it, what you could do is you deposit your stable coins that you now have from selling your hex. Then you go borrow more hex and you sell more hex, right? And so now, as the price drops down, you owe, let's say you deposited 100 grand, okay, and you borrowed, let's say $25,000 worth of hex, all right. So you owe the platform, let's say, I don't know, I think like 3 million hex, right? So you borrowed 3 million hex versus your $100,000 stable coins, okay. Then you go and sell that on the market, all right. And now you owe the platform 3 million hex. So if the price goes down, the amount of that hex is going to be cheaper than when you sold it, right? So now you can take and buy back that 3 million hex with only, let's say it was $30,000, and you buy it back for $20,000. Okay, so now you still have $10,000 of profit that you've made, and you pay back the platform the hex that you owe, and now you have
Uh-huh.
$110,000. Make sense?
Okay, so basically it's a way for people to short if they don't have the asset.
Correct. Yep. And then
Right.
if the inverse happens, if hex starts to go up, what
Then they
happens
get
is
wrecked.
exactly, yeah. So they take that collateral that they've used, so that $100,000. If that debt position starts to be worth, I think on DAI, what's the 70% LTV. So if Hex went up to, let's say that loan was now worth $70,000, their $100,000 stable coins will start to be used to go buy Hex on the market at a higher price. So they're going to be forced to be buyers at the higher price. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And that's what Richard was talking about. The shorters get wrecked, and that moves the price up higher. So,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
yep. I can't
We
see
can't hear
the.
you. 43.
We have a question here from Mudhog. Are fees paid to stakers with flash loans?
That's correct. Yes, they do. Yep. The stakers get those fees. Yep.
Actually, we should probably just go over. So, like 50% of all the fees are paid to stakers, and then how is the rest divided up?
The rest is given to depositors. So you have the
Well, I
total
thought the
amount that's being.
didn't the team have an allocation or something like that?
So the team has the treasury amount, right? But if you're not staking, like say you have 1% of the fiat supply, right? So if you're not staking your 1% of those staker fees, that's just
You're
going to
not
the
getting.
treasury anyways, right? So the treasury percentage, I think it's between the team and then the treasury itself, I think it's 27%, right, of the stakers. They don't have to stake because it goes to the treasury anyways, right? Because those tokens aren't staked. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you don't stake your tokens, or your fees are given to the treasury, and when you stake your tokens, they're given to you, right? The fees. Does that make sense?
hmm
So, yep,
Okay. So 50% to depositors, 50% to stakers, and
correct.
the team has an allocation um, of the treasury. So anything that, and they're probably not going to stake because they'll just be superfluous. So
Yeah,
that,
it's redundant, right? They don't have to.
yes. So
I
that,
don't even
like,
think that they've minted a majority of the supply, anyways. Like, they can do that later.
so they're not collecting those fees if they're not staked, and they're just part of the treasury. I bet it's going to the treasury, so they're getting it anyway, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right.
it's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
redundancy, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So,
Cool.
but yeah, if you're a holder of fiat, you can stake to earn hard cash assets, right? You're not getting more of the fiat token. You're getting right now. There's actually getting a little bit of PHUX rewards, that's pretty cool. But I've been told that will not last forever, right? So enjoy it while it does last. And I think you get 4% right now if you stake your fiat.
Right. Yeah.
4.67%.
I really like it, pHux. Actually, I've been using it, and one thing
PHUX
I
is great.
think just yeah, the one thing that I think people have to be conscious of is those APYs that people are getting are very dependent on the pHux price.
That's right.
So the pHux price goes down, those APYs go down, and vice versa, because it's the APY. A lot of it is paid in pHux.
Yeah. So in those farms that you have on those bigger pools, they do get the revenue for just providing liquidity outright. Okay, and then if you stake in those farms, if you go into the farms, they're called gauges on PHUX. Then you can get a share of the PHUX inflation, right? Which that's also a fixed token, and we can get into that if we want to, but. Yep.
Yeah, just a little bit. At the moment, it's the team who decides which pools are the official ones, and therefore are the ones that are getting the extra awards of pHux. How is that ever going to be? Like I know, and then people vote on them as well. And I saw. What is that kind of process? Is that you see the votes and then you kind of decide, or like, because I know, for instance, there are some tokens which have really been pushing to be in an official pool, but have not been able to. And I was wondering if you're one of those tokens which aren't in an official pool, what is the process for trying to get enough support to become one?
There is no quid pro quo. So there is no like set of rules. It's, there's a general, if it's innovative or if it's useful or if there is sufficient real liquidity, right? And then there's just generalities. Okay. There's not really a set number of rules, right? We don't need meme coins coming on there.
Yeah,
And then only
just
lasting for a
what
month.
would be what would be the process then? Like, is it just like basically come into the Telegram and bring it to your attention and ask for it, or
Pretty much. Yeah.
is
Yep.
right? Okay, and then it's the team basically just decides, right?
Yep. And then once it's given a gauge, then the community can go vote on, if it thinks that one's useful, or if there's people that like to provide liquidity for that one, then they can vote for, the distribution of the pHux farm, right?
And what kind of level of liquidity would get your attention as part of the team?
I mean, you could look at what's already there, right? You can kind of get a general idea, so.
And generally speaking, you as a team, you'd be looking to give the most liquidity the most rewards to where the most liquidity is.
You could gather that from the market, yeah. I would say, generally speaking, it'll level out, right? So if, for instance, if you have higher rewards on a particular pair, generally the liquidity will grow, right? And then it'll kind of level out relative to its risk profile. I would guess, right?
Yeah.
Some pools, like the Alex pool, I think has a higher APY, but it is more risky, right? The prices move a lot more volatilely. I don't even know the word. Than say the stablecoin pool, right? The stablecoin pool, it's not very volatile, and it pays out a very low APY. But there's other
But
pools
it's
where, like I just
risk-free,
described, where
much more risk-free. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So it's just it all depends.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the other thing is that people get fees on those pools, so the volatility is actually,
You should,
it depends
generally
how much
speaking, when
trading goes
you're
on. But
liquidity providing, you should be paid handsomely for high volatility.
yeah, sure.
That's just my understanding.
Yeah, that makes sense. And more so if you have a high trading, that's what you really want. You want lots of people trading that, so that. But then, yeah, if you don't want impermanent loss, if there's high volatility, you have more potential impermanent loss.
Yep. And PHUX also has they pay the people that stake their PHUX tokens. They also get a share of the fees, right? In the form of the fees are used to buy up the it's called Prime PHUX liquidity token for the actual PHUX pulse pair, right? And then that's given to the stakers of the PHUX.
Yeah, and that's locked up. That has time locking, so
Correct. Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
more by locking it way more into the future. Yeah,
That's correct. Yeah. It's a little bit more
right.
intricate than pHUX, or I'm sorry, than Fiat. Yeah.
And do you ever plan to have like I know, let's say you be able to put the stable pool on Fiat.io, and then people can deposit a liquidity pool onto, because that's tokenized, isn't it? Like,
Yes, that's correct. That'd be cool,
and
right?
so,
I'd like to see that.
yeah, that could be interesting. I mean,
Well, that sort of is the question here. He knows that they're separate applications, but Hex Enthusiast wants to know, does Fiat provide any benefits to pHux, or does it get all its liquidity from depositors on Fiat?
Yeah, so there is some really interesting synergies that can be had between pHUX and Fiat. Okay, so we can kind of brainstorm. Obviously, they're built by the same devs. Okay, the same team has created both of these. And in Ethereum, these two protocols had to trust each other, right? Because pHUX is a fork of Balancer, and Fiat is a fork of Aave, right? So these two teams had to come in and trust each other to make sure that they weren't going to screw each other. Okay, and they came up with interesting ideas between things called balancer boosted pools, which we could see on pHUX one day, which is, I believe, it works like you have the deposit receipt that you have on Fiat, right? So when you deposit on Fiat, you can take in your loan, or your deposits are tokens in form of a receipt, right? So you can take that token, you can send it to yourself on another address to up your collateral level, or you can take and send it to somebody else, and then they can instantly have collateral on Fiat. Okay, and you can take those tokens, you can put them in liquidity pools, and people can use those to buy up collateral that they need to kind of save, for whatever reason. They can, speculate on those tokens, they can arbitrage them, whatever, right? And then you can pair those in liquidity pools with all of the other, they're called WDAI, wrapped USDC, wrapped USDT. You can put those in a pool, and they can be traded against, right? And on Balancer, they have specific things called Balancer boosted pools, which I don't know exactly how they work. There was a bug with them recently, so we don't have them on pHux right now. But maybe one day when they fix that stuff, we'll have those particular pools. But I think we can have the regular old, V2 style pHUX pools where it's weighted liquidity or like stable swaps. And if you have farms with those, that can incentivize deposits on fiat, right? Just because, let's say the APY is higher on one of these pools, you can incentivize people to deposit on fiat and then collateral, take that receipt and then go deposit it on pHUX. So that's just one of the things that you can have between the synergies. Okay. With pHUX.
I've got another question, like about the pHux pools. Like most of them, because you can have multiple assets in a pool, most of them seem to have that. And I'm just curious, why do you think people haven't just been doing like a straight up two sides 50-50? Is that just too boring, or like what?
I mean, there's a couple, if I'm not mistaken. There's one that I think is literally just 50-50. Yeah. So pulsing for fiat is a pool that is 50% fiat, 50% pulse. And that's on that's like the top 5 pool on pHUX right now. And that's a 50-50.
That's probably because you're giving it rewards. It's top 5.
Yeah, it has a farm. Yeah. But the unique, let's say, the unique benefit statement for having a different weighted pool would be for people that are starting tokens, right? So, let's say you had like B9, right? That's Papa Boner's pool, right? And he did, I think, 80-20. So he did 80% of his token and then 20% pulse, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Don't quote me on that. But and that's great for him because he can allow a lot better order execution for people that want to buy his token, and then he doesn't have to put up as much assets to back the liquidity pool, right? So it's it's kind of beneficial.
So less liquidity for people wanting to sell it.
There is, yeah. So you have the inverse effect, right? Yeah. So when you go to exit, obviously you're going to incur more slippage than you will incur when you're just buying, right? It's just naturally going to happen when you have it like that. It's going to be, so.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't seen more of these pools where because on PulseX you can't get that great an APY if you're not a farm, and so and on pHux you can set the rate, so you can set it at 1% or even probably 2%. What would be really nice is I know that we can have the ability to change that rate, but I actually went through trying to do it, and it was just too difficult to actually do because there's no front end support for it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but yes,
that is an advantage. That is an advantage, a competitive advantage over PulseX in that and I'm surprised some like more pools haven't popped up of just straight up double-sided, even 60-40, like to make it a bit easier to buy in and a little bit more difficult to sell out of or something like that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most interesting pools that we have right now is probably the PLSX almost single-sided staking, right? That one is literally 90% PLSX, 5% prime pHUX, and then 5% stables, right? So that's definitely a pool that's an interesting pool, sir, for sure.
So you can buy a lot of that and not get any slippage, basically, but don't try to sell it.
So, as far as I understand it, you should get very good order execution on the way in and less on the way out. Yes, I believe that's how it is. Yes, I believe so. So,
just on the fiat side of things, so this was actually the token was launched on Ethereum, is that right?
That's correct.
And
yeah.
then it got forked
No.
to Pulse.
Okay.
It was forked over when Pulse was created. But on the fiat, on the Ethereum side, is there anything? And this goes to Hex Enthusiasts' question. are you guys going to be doing anything on the Ethereum side, or you're just going to be focusing on Pulse?
Yeah, so that's a great question. To a little bit of background, so eFiat is what we call it, the fiat version on Ethereum. That fiat protocol was launched as a bonus and as a kind of a 2-for-1 for the guys that sacrifice for fame. Okay, now the original fiat guys got their same allocation for this eFiat token, and then there was a pull or a draw on the treasury that also gave to the fame guys. Okay. And then it was launched at a time where Pulse wasn't coming out, and it created a little bit of liquidity for the fame guys and for the fiat guys, and allowed them to start speculating. And obviously, we launched the platform on ETH. And the goal was to kind of have a proof of concept to be like, hey, look, we're committed here. We're actually doing this stuff, and here you can go play with it on ETH until PulseChain comes out, right? And then you'll get the version on PulseChain, right? So that was more of a posturing of the possibilities of what could be done, I guess you could say, and the proof of concept, like I mentioned earlier, and obviously now that Pulse has come out, pretty much everything in this ecosystem on the ETH side is depressed, right? So Hedron is very depressed. Even eHex is very depressed. Icosa, all of the Maxi stuff. eFiat is also in that category. It is not special, right? So it's finding its value in the Hex ecosystem market on Ethereum, which is just depressed at the moment, right? Everybody's moved to PulseChain, which is expected, right? Maybe in the bull market, when the liquidity starts to thicken up on the ETH side for the ecosystem, you can have higher limits, right? Because it's very restricted over there right now, because there's literally just it is bone dry in the liquidity department on the ETH side for this ecosystem. So you're not going to see like on the stable coins here or on Hex, 80 grand being borrowed. Like it's not possible on ETH. On eFiat right now, just because there's just not an abundance of liquidity. Now,
if you want to buy any of those tokens, it's
you even get a better order execution on PulseChain. So like, I mean, so if you want to speculate,
for the bridge tokens,
So if you wanted to bridge over your eFiat, your best liquidity is going to be on PulseChain. It's not on ETH anymore. So even that goes to show you how illiquid it is over on the ETH side for this stuff. And I will mention that the forked over version of eFiat is worthless, right? There is no value there. You have to bridge in your eFiat from Ethereum, and that has value, right? So just to clarify.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
And just to clarify, there's a question, like Angor said, it's not that hard to change the fee in your own pool. It was, because what you have to do is you're actually setting up your own contract when you create a pool. And you do have admin right, do have the rights over that contract to do things like change the fee, but you have to get your contract verified before you can do anything. And I just started trying to go through that process, and it was just like too complex for my my small brain.
When the front end opens up, you'll be able to do it pretty easily. But when you're trying to do it on chain and then you have to verify the code, it's pretty difficult.
So I've got a question here from Maximus Experience. Now, just I'll preface it with like, we've already looked at the list of tokens or assets on Fiat, and I don't see Hedron in there. But his question is, I'd like to understand how to use Fiat for risk management, e.g., shorting Hedron at the same time as buying Hedron in case my trade is wrong and the price goes down. I have no idea what that means, but maybe you guys do. You guys, I guess, play in this sort of area. I don't really play in the, in this arbitrage type area. So maybe you guys can explain to me what he means.
So I think in this case, this person would be more, it'd probably be better off for this person to use something like Fame. Okay. So let's say Fame launches and there's Hedron on Fame, which I don't know if there will be. Okay. But let's say that there is, right? And let's say you buy Hedron, and you think it's going to go up, but you want to protect yourself in case it goes down. So what you could do is you could deposit, a small percentage of your portfolio onto Fame, and then open up a leveraged short position. So 30x short, right, on your position with a little bit of your portfolio of the Hedron position, right, and then you can use that as like an insurance policy. So if the price does go down, your short kind of protects you from that downside to a certain extent, right? Whereas if it goes up in price and it does a double, obviously you get liquidated, but you're at peace of mind because you're still making money, and you open up that insurance policy and you paid a small premium just in case the market moved against you. Does that make sense?
The other thing you can do with Hedron, which is
Mm,
kind of
mm, mm.
kind of simpler and actually how it was designed to work, is that you just can get an advance on your Hedron for a stake, and then like you get an advance and then you sell it into USD or whatever, and then if the price of Hedron goes down, you take that USD and you buy the Hedron, pay off your loan, and you've got excess Hedron.
Yeah.
Like that.
So
That's what
yeah,
a,
you could do that. Yeah. So if you wanted, like in your description, you're saying to short Hedron and then to buy lower and just buy more Hedron, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah,
You could totally do that.
you borrow your Hedron on your hex stake, and you turn that into US. If you want to short it, you turn it into USD.
Oh
So
yeah, you
then,
could do it
if the
directly
price
with
goes
Hedron. Yeah.
down, you've got more. You've got all this USD. With a little bit of that USD, you buy the Hedron back to pay off your loan, and
Correct.
and Hedron is going to give you the best interest rate for your borrow that you'll find, and probably the best like terms in terms of having giving you plenty of time just to pay off a little bit at a time as well.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Hedron is very unique in that aspect. Yeah. And just want to make sure my mic is still on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I touched it. It's very picky when I touch it. But anyways, yeah. So I think Hedron is on ePhiat, right? So you could either borrow Hedron against your hex stakes, or you could borrow Hedron against your hex deposits with Fiat, right? You could have done it whichever way you wanted. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, for the the level at which your Hedron would be worth it to borrow the hex, the price would have to go and increase substantially versus hex, if I'm not mistaken, right? So like if you wanted to borrow like a decent amount of money versus your hex stakes, Hedron would have to be multiples higher than it is now, right? Like, but eventually maybe it'll get to that profitable level where it has the economic energy to where you
Yeah.
can
Well,
actually borrow.
I think that's the reason that in V2, like that Alex is developing at the moment, he wants to.
Yeah, he's got
You're going to
some
be able to borrow
internet
at
company.
10x leverage.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And if you already have a bonus at 10x, then you'll get another 10. Like you're going to be able to borrow a ton, especially
that's nice.
if you're an OG Hedron kind of person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'm excited to see what Alex does. Whatever pretty much
Mm,
everything he does, it's like a little bit of gold when he touches it. So excited to
mm.
see what he does. But yeah, if you wanted to just open up a regular
So you can. I didn't think you could borrow Hedron on. You can borrow Hedron on Fiat at the moment, can you?
on eFiat, yes, it's not a
On
lot of
eFiat.
liquidity,
Oh, sorry.
but when Hedron has more liquidity on PulseChain, I'm sure that it'll be added as an asset, right? But right now, it's not very liquid at the moment. So
Another question. This one from Flames. Can you deposit Pulse and borrow against it and receive stables, or does it need to be the same asset? Look, I think I can even answer this one. I believe you can. Yeah, borrow and receive stables.
that's
Am I
correct.
right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's
And you can borrow not just Pulse, you can borrow whatever you want, right? So you can have a nice portfolio of deposits on here, and then you can borrow whatever assets that you want, right? So basically, you have your collateral amount that you have, and then you can borrow against that collateral amount, right? So if you have $100,000 worth of a mix of hex, PulseX, you can borrow whatever you want, right? It's up to you. You can borrow ETH, you can borrow one of the stable coins, you can borrow many different things. It's literally just based off of your your collateral versus your debt. That's all that the
Is
platform cares about.
it from this list?
Yes, you can
That's
borrow
here?
and deposit whatever's on that list. Yes,
So there's 8 different options here.
correct.
We've got Pulse, PulseX, Hex, DAI from Ethereum, USDC from Ethereum, USDT from Ethereum, Wrapped ETH, and WBTC
Yeah.
coin. Now, I'm guessing, I mean, this is just an assumption on my side, that once there's like some native stables and they've proven themselves to be good, are they things that you guys would consider rolling into those list of assets?
I think that yes. As soon as those have sufficient liquidity and whatever the devs decide, as in whether it's once they run their numbers and their calculations on whether it's worth it to add, yeah, of course. The more assets that you can deposit and borrow on this that are blue chip, right, for the chain, the better it is, right? So obviously you don't want the shitcoin of the month on on the platform, right? So you want
Of the week.
yeah, exactly.
Of the week.
Yeah.
That's sort of where we're at the moment.
Precisely. Yeah. So obviously, you want things that are going to hold their value, that they have a real use case, that they're not going to be a problem for you in the future. So like one of the like LL liquid loans, maybe we'll see that on here one day. I don't have a time frame, or whenever they launch, whenever they get sufficient liquidity, right? Or like the Coast guys, that'd be lovely to have on Fiat, right? Once they reach a certain point of their liquidity and their their users, right? But yeah, no, that's I think the devs, it behooves them to have more of these assets. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, mate.
It's
I
okay.
clicked the wrong button there.
Hey, I've got one more question just quickly. Do you use an Oracle in Fiat? And if so,
Yeah.
which one are you using?
So we're using an in-house Oracle. We're not waiting on anybody. We've built an Oracle with low latency, and it's the same Oracle that will be used for Fame. So in-house.
Okay.
Once there's a solution that can be used, then the devs will move to the decentralized solution, right? But for right now, low latency, highly accurate Oracle is what we're using in-house. So
And so so is it literally you guys are just like a dev is basically on these computers just setting the prices? Like, how does he get the price? Where does he get the prices from?
well, it's an Oracle, right? It's like a fallback
Yeah.
Oracle. Okay, so like any other Oracle, it's just not being run on a decentralized network, right? It's in-house. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But where does I mean that? How does he get that information? Or maybe it's too technical a question. I don't know. Is it just an?
The
From the
information
internet, yeah?
is
From
not,
the internet.
yeah, it's pulled off of the exchanges that these assets are listed on, right? So on the
Right.
various liquidity pools on PulseX, the various liquidity pools that we have on PHUX, right?
Right.
So it's not pulled from just one place, or like off of Dex Screener or something. It's pulled off of the liquidity pools themselves, where we derive the price, right?
Awesome.
That's cool. So that's, I mean, that's always something that like we look at and we say, hey, how can these protocols be better? That's one of the things that could be better. But in the absence of an Oracle, as long as people know that that's that's what they're getting something that's being maintained by the team themselves.
Yep.
In a centralized way, then as long as people know what they're dealing with, then yeah, that's the most important thing.
There you go. Yep. And obviously, when there's a better decentralized solution, team will move to that, right? So.
Yep, absolutely.
But right now, obviously, we just don't have that. So, but
yeah,
anyways.
yep. And that's mainly because it's PulseChain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
That
we just don't have
that's
we don't have Link over here, right? They're
yeah,
probably not going to come immediately or right now, right? They might come when we have greater support from the overall crypto communities and stuff, I guess, or when they see that there's value over here. I don't know.
So this is more a function of the fact that PulseChain is just so fresh. It's so new that these things haven't been built out properly yet.
I think so.
But we do. I think like we could expect that as time goes on, as the the need for these things increases across not just what you guys need, but other protocols as well. I think these things will come into existence.
Yeah.
It's just it's a matter of time, I believe.
I think so too. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, we're one of the first protocols that are using an Oracle on PulseChain right now. If don't hold me to it, but I'm almost certain that that's the case right now, right? And as these protocols start to populate the space, these Oracle services will follow, right? So I guess we're the chicken in the scenario of the chicken and egg, I guess you could say, right? So when there's more chickens, the eggs will pop up eventually, right? So I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well,
People are going to lay oracles.
This has been.
So
Yeah, that's it. Well, Dylan, thanks for coming on, mate. Appreciate it. You've explained this to me. Now I have an understanding. I hope that the people who have been watching also have a better understanding of what Fiat is and what they can use it for. I look forward to a future where we can really look to protocols like this instead of banks,
right.
and at least have the option. To decide, I want to go with the bank, or I want to go with something and use assets I've already got. That's what I look forward to. But yeah, look, thanks again for coming and spending your time. It has been, as I mentioned at the beginning, there was in your area, there's been some terrible weather. So appreciate you making the time to come out. Did you have anything you wanted to say to the audience before we finish up?
Sure. I had the I guess you could say the privilege of spending hours upon hours of time on testnet. Perfecting how I use Fiat, perfecting how I use PulseX, perfecting how I use liquid loans, perfecting how I used Famous, right? And so there's a lot of people that didn't do that, and now they're playing catch up, right? So I would implore you to go and start using this stuff. It is extremely cheap to use transaction wise. Like the other day when I was testing it out, I was using $40, right? And I was paying a penny per transaction, right? Which is stupid cheap for an Aave fork. Okay. If you don't know, Aave, you pay hundreds of dollars of fees to just use it on ETH, right? So it is literally a whale protocol. Okay. So I would implore you to go throw like $20 in this, deposit some, go borrow something, go, try out some strategies that you may have. If you think like, oh my gosh, wow, yeah, I could probably do this and I could probably make a little bit of money here, right? Go try it, right? Go explore, try and learn as much as you can, right? Get familiar with it, and then when the bull comes and you are and there's an abundance of liquidity, and you're able to use, tens of thousands of dollars to, do this stuff, you will have learned in the bear market, which is the time to be learning, and you'll actually be very versed in how to use this stuff, and you won't be playing catch up while everybody else is playing catch up, right? So I implore you guys, for your own benefit, go start using this stuff, please. Like, get familiar with it now, so you don't have to play catch up in the bull, right? So that's all I have to say about that.
There you go, Bluey.
Yeah, just quickly, thanks heaps for coming on, Dylan. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, and also just to you and your team, like, thanks heaps for all the things that you're building out in this ecosystem. Like, I think pHux is fantastic. I think Fatty.io is really great as well if people want to check their portfolios, and that's just something that you guys have built for free for the community. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that.
Yeah, Fatty, PHATTY.io. If you want to have a good, and you can see all of your Hedron stakes, your Acosta stakes, your Hex stakes, when they, you can. What would be great is if, because you have a list of them, if you have a lot of addresses, you can't see exactly which addresses each thing belongs to. And so that would be, I mean, there are improvements, but already that what it is fantastic and something that's better than a lot of the stuff out there already. So, you know, really appreciate you guys building out all of that stuff. And yeah, thanks for doing all that, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys. Or thanks for having me, guys. Yeah.
No worries at all, mate. No worries at all. And a big thank you to everyone in the chat. Make sure you click the like, subscribe, share it out on Twitter. We appreciate it.